Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the Town of Somers Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is September 21st, 2021. Denise, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Gio?
Here.
Mr. Lansky?
Present.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Chairman Canestra?
Here.
Thank you.
I'd ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I'd like to say a welcome to everyone. Our meetings have been primarily remote. This is kind of our full meeting in person, and we're going to try to continue these meetings. Current town rules, as long as board members are vaccinated, we do not have to wear masks. People in the public still have to wear masks, so that's the rule in the townhouse, and anybody who's unvaccinated still has to wear a mask. Okay. First item we have on the agenda this evening is that of Christine Crucia-Smith. I don't believe there's anyone here to represent the applicant, and we have not heard from the applicant for quite some time. So we're not going to carry over this item anymore. We're going to take it off the agenda, and if the applicant wishes to reapply, they certainly can do so. So then we're going to go to item 2 on the agenda. This is the application of Lawton Adams Jr. This is an application for a special exception use permit to build an accessory apartment above an existing garage attached to an existing one-family dwelling in an R40 residential district at 21 Route 116 in Purdy's. Is someone here to represent the applicant? Sir, if you could just come up to the microphone and please give us your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Lawton Adams, 21 Route 116, Purdy's, and been a lifelong resident of Somers. Would like to build an apartment above my garage so my son and his fiance could move in.
Okay. So you're looking for a special exception use permit for the accessory apartment. I see that we have been provided with the application and the plans for the apartment. And I see that there's a kitchen, bathroom, one bedroom. One question I did have, and Tom, maybe you can answer this. I'm looking at the dimensions of the apartment, and from best I can determine, it looks like it might be 40 feet by 22 and a half.
That's the exterior dimensions.
Okay, because I was coming up with about 900 square feet then if I multiply those two out to get the square footage, and it looks like there's a notation on the plan of 775. So I just wanted to check, because I believe the limit of an accessory apartment is about 800.
800.
That'd be between 300 and 800 square feet.
Okay.
So if you take the section where it comes out of the house and there's a hallway and a closet, that's not part of the apartment. That's actually will be part of our house.
Oh, I see. So coming up the stairs, so you don't really start the apartment until that door there?
Correct. Yes, you enter the stairs, you go through the next door, then you're into the apartment. And I think that's where you're coming up with the extra square feet.
Okay. Now, that little void by the door, as you're coming up the stairs on the left-hand side, is that a closet? What is it?
Yes. Yep, that would be a closet. Not for the apartment, though.
Right. So that still seems like a lot of square footage, because I mean, because basically the square footage I was including was from the top of the stairs to that door and to the left. So that might be, it looks like it's 5 feet by possibly...
So when I say door, see this door?
Yes.
We're talking about the same door.
Yes, we are talking about
Yeah.
that door.
Okay.
So if I just do the square footage of that, shall we say, little lobby area, I come up with 5 feet by maybe 10 feet? If I'm including the closet, you know.
Oh, you're talking about over here too?
Yeah, I'm talking about this whole
Whole
area.
thing, right.
Yeah, because my equation was 40 by 22 and a half. So even if I were to take 5 times 10 is 50, even if I were to go to 15, that'd be 75, it'd be 825.
Take this out.
It seems like it's a little over. You know, and you know, we can give you a variance possibly for that difference,
No, it's,
but we're down to I'm maybe down to 825 and you're at 775.
But don't we have to go to the ceiling height line?
Well, that's,
So your 22 and a half is going down to 6'6".
you're
So,
including the dormers. That's-
yeah, so if you started at 7 foot, or 7'6" would be where I would start, which is almost that 8-foot line, you're gonna find that it's a compliant, apartment.
oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying from 8 feet in,
I think I would say 7'6". You know, he's got an 8-foot line. I mean, 7'6" is habitable space, in my opinion.
right?
Okay.
So but basically from that 8-foot line in, that's where I would measure. And since he's just over 800 square foot all the way out to the 6'6", I would say that it's certainly within the 800 square feet.
I see.
That's my opinion on the measurement.
Yeah, because 6'6", I guess 6'6" ceiling height for those dormers is kind of low.
It's not habitable space,
Right,
up to 7'6".
right. Does that seem reasonable to you, Tom? Is that your opinion on this? Okay. And this is not built yet, is it?
No.
It's not built yet. It will be built. Right, the structure is there, but the interior has not been built yet.
Correct.
So you're looking for approval, as you should, before you build it.
Correct.
It's always nice when we get approval before someone builds, yes. Yeah. Doesn't always happen. Oh, and if you could just please speak into the microphone also, so everybody can hear.
That's all correct.
Okay, good, good.
So, just the special exception use permit, right, would be to have an accessory apartment. Is there, which, as I read the code, you can add to an existing structure. You can convert an existing structure into an accessory apartment so long as that structure was constructed prior to 1992. 91? 92.
I don't, I'd have to find the date.
Oh, that's right, that's exactly right.
So I think,
92.
I just want to clarify what we're granting. So is there something additional required?
Well, if the garage is, that's an old property. I drive by every day.
The house was built in the early 60s.
And when was the
The
garage built?
garage is connected to the
To the
house.
house. So that predates 92.
Right, so predates.
So
That's all I'm clarifying. If you're adding on to an existing structure as to converting an existing structure, is that fine, Tom?
Well, the code says it's gotta be located within the principal dwelling, building, or an accessory building, provided that such principal or accessory building was constructed or issued a building permit prior to April 1st, 1992.
Which it has.
The house has, the garage is more recent.
Oh, the garage, when was the garage built?
June of this year.
Oh, June of this year. Oh, see, I was under the understanding that it was built with the house, but it's connected to the house, but it was recently built.
Correct.
But hold on.
So that was my concern. I just wanted to.
That's a good point. No, that's an important
I
point.
think we're conflating something. Okay, so if you look at paragraph, we're talking about paragraph D. And it says, the minimum floor area for an accessory apartment shall be 300 square feet and have a maximum floor area of 800 square feet.
Right.
Each accessory apartment shall contain not more than one bedroom. And then it says, unless, in the opinion of the zoning board of appeals, a second bedroom can be adequately accommodated within the existing building and will not overburden the property, and the building was issued a CO prior to April 1st, 1992. So if he has one bedroom here, this paragraph, that second part of that paragraph is not applicable. And that's what, unless there's another April 1st, 1992 date in this thing, this relates to a 2-bedroom. Otherwise, so a 1-bedroom is okay, and that's what he's showing.
That's the way, I've never
Okay.
told it like that.
But you gotta read the language.
Yeah, could I just?
Yeah, paragraph E there. Just read it closely and.
Thank you. here on it. You wanna take a
No,
look?
I understand. I understood what it was. Thank you.
Right, so if you just go
Go
straight
down
to.
to, go down to E.
Well,
sorry.
But if I don't, if I go to C,
Okay, is there another thing before? Just
if I go to B, an accessory apartment may be located within the principal dwelling building or an
Okay.
accessory building, provided that such principal or accessory building was constructed or
Okay, so that's another,
That's another code
That's
section
another
in B,
section, so hold
okay.
on.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm recalling.
or, so, building.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was, accessory apartment may be located in the principal. So he's got a bigger problem.
Yeah, well, so, you know, which is something that I've always questioned, right? Because the reason we have the ability to grant accessory apartments is because we want to create more affordable housing for young family members, et cetera, to remain in Somers or stay in Somers or come back to Somers. So that's generally a good thing. I've always questioned a little bit why that exists, but.
I mean, my interpretation of the intent always is that they didn't want every resident in Somers adding on an accessory apartment, because then it opens the door,
New construction.
Proposed with an accessory apartment.
and that was the issue, so, yeah. Because think about it, I mean, you could, you know,
So why is it repetitive then? Do you know what I'm saying? It's the drafting,
It also says the house, so
the drafting is confusing because if,
a paragraph B kind of stands on its own.
it does, but why would they? I don't like the drafting.
You could make an interpretation that says, right, an accessory building, provided that such principal or accessory building, meaning one or the other, was constructed prior to 1992.
Well, that's more
That's an
congruent with E. But I don't know that I feel that
I'm
interpretation.
playing games. but
Yeah,
that-
I'm not here to advocate for a side. I read paragraph B on its own, but to give paragraph E the effect of the language, it would seem that the paragraph B would have been not meant to have that. So,
I mean, I think the intent of the code is to prevent an overwhelming number of accessory apartments where you're now turning one family residences into two. Because, you know, Tom's right, you could build a development and put an accessory apartment with every single unit, and now you, instead of having 50 single-family homes, you have 50 homes with 50 accessory apartments.
it's almost like a two-family dwelling.
Yeah, so now, are we really allowing multifamily?
I got a question, just to be
Sure, yes,
you
go
know,
ahead.
just to play lawyer. If the garage is attached to the house, is it an accessory building, or is it a continuum of the principal building? And if it's a continuum of the principal building, and the principal building predates a CO, then we don't have an issue.
But it was built, the garage or that extension
Well-
was built on after.
But is it part of the principal building or not?
How far is the garage from the house?
How far?
Yeah.
10 feet?
It's connected, right?
Yeah, it's connected.
Oh, it's connected.
So Tommy sees it as part of the principal building. So if this is
Okay.
part of the principal building, and you got a CO, how old is that house? 60s. you said?
Early 60s, yeah,
Okay.
62.
And so if it's part of that, then we don't run into the CO issue here, of an accessory building with a CO, not prior to that.
Yes, correct. I would agree with that. I was thinking it was detached.
So you think that,
I
you think an interpretation here is as long as the main structure was built prior to 1992, even if you add on something, that's still part of the main structure and you can do an accessory apartment?
Because it's not an accessory structure, it's an
Well,
extension.
I think that's a fair interpretation of how this is written. Whether that's the spirit of what was meant to be done here is a whole different dialectic. Frankly, you could very reasonably read this code and interpret it that way. And the way our legal system works, because we have people who draft these things in a difficult way, they say the ambiguity gets interpreted for the applicant. So, as against the municipality. That's good current law.
Mr. Adams, how big is your property?
7 acres, just over 7 acres.
Okay.
So he meets the 40,000 square feet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would have much more concern if this was a small property as opposed to a larger property, because obviously your neighbors are further away from you.
Well,
Correct.
if it didn't meet any of the other requirements, we would be more, I think, buttonholed than we are. We're into a somewhat of an ambiguity into the code, and it's reasonable to interpret the ambiguity in favor of applicant, I think, in this circumstance.
But if, Tom, you consider this garage to be part of the principal building?
Yes.
So then there's no,
Well, that's his interpretation, and we can accept that. I'm just saying that I feel like this code has some softness, some grayness in it.
Right.
Art, can I see that again?
I'm happy to follow the building inspector's interpretation and read the code that way, and
therefore
And
the
therefore
primary structure was built
There's no
before
issue.
1992, and that's not an issue.
yeah, I think
We're
that-
just going with a special exception use permit
Yeah.
criteria.
I don't, given the way it's written, there'd be no reason to have the paragraph B and E written the same way. And so for me, that creates a conflict, which if I were sitting in some type of judicial body, I would say,
Because I
Gotta go
will
the
say,
applicant.
based on this discussion here, in the sense, as long as the garage is attached to the house and it goes back to the 60s, I don't have a problem with it.
And as Tom has said, you consider this garage part of the principal dwelling. Because it says an accessory apartment may be located within the principal dwelling, building, or an accessory building, provided that such principal or accessory building was constructed or issued a building permit prior to April 1, 1992. Well, the principal building certainly was.
it fits within the plain language. Though, you read the whole thing, it could be argued either way.
Right, I see how you can make an argument either way on
So,
this.
but when you go to the tie goes to the applicant rule, I would vote in favor of granting this, absent someone clarifying this section.
Yeah, I certainly see how you could construe it like that and understand it to be, yeah, what you're saying. One other thing I think bodes well for you is you're on 7 acres. If you were on 1 acre with people all around you and, it
Something
might
different.
be a little tighter, it could be an issue. Okay.
And there's no other apartment in the, right?
No. Nope.
So let's just go through the rest of the criteria and make sure all that's in order before we go further.
Okay, so we're under 800 square feet. Principal dwelling was built before 1992. Tom, have you done any other inspection on this property? Because it's not,
I've been out there, yeah.
you've been out there. Do you know of any other issues that would preclude the issuance of a?
The owner lives on site, there's plenty of parking, a proposed, separate, septic system would be in conjunction with the issuance of the building permit,
Right.
and so he'll have a Board of Health approval,
Right, so,
and it seems compliant with all other aspects, listed in the code section.
Right, right.
so you have an off-street parking spot. It appears as one building, it doesn't appear as a two-family.
Got a separate entrance, as you can see on the, it will have a separate entrance with the stairs deck to the back kitchen.
Yeah, I see the door coming
Okay.
through the kitchen, yep.
Now, is that a deck too?
That will be a deck.
It's small. All right, I'm satisfied.
I think I feel fairly comfortable. Ernie,
Yes.
Tom?
Yep.
I would ask if there's anyone here who wishes to speak in regard to this application, but there's no one else in the room, so. Of course, proper notice was given to the neighbors. If anybody wished to speak, they could certainly come here.
I got a few calls, and
Okay.
once I told them what the application was. They were, oh, sounds good, thank you.
Okay, there was no objections. Okay. Okay.
I saw the sign 50 times.
Yeah.
It's handwritten.
Okay. All right, so, any further discussion, questions of the applicant at this point in time? Does the applicant have anything else you wish to say to us at this point in time?
No? Good
Okay.
here.
I think we're ready to vote. We're going to vote on two things. First, can we vote on the type of action?
Type 2?
Second?
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Lansky?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Chairman Knistra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can we have a motion as to whether we're going to grant or not grant the special exception use permit to build an accessory apartment?
I'll make a motion to grant the special exception use permit to build an accessory apartment above an existing garage attached to a one-family dwelling at 21 Route 116, Purdy's.
Second?
To be renewed in 7 years?
To be renewed
Yeah.
every 7 years.
Thank
Yes.
you. Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Lansky?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Chairman Knistra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir. Your application has been granted. You may not have been aware of it, but you did need all 4 votes tonight because there's only 4 members present out of 7, but you did get it, so. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are no further applications on our agenda this evening. The only other matter we have is approval of the July 2021 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Yes.
I'm just going to, any changes?
No.
I'm just going to approve by verbal consensus. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll consider the July 2021 meeting minutes approved. Last thing I will mention is our next meeting is scheduled for October 19, 2021, Tuesday. We hope to be in person here, so that's what's planned. I'm not sure we have anything on the agenda so far. Denise?
We may.
Okay.
We may.
So we'll have to see what happens on that.
Keep you posted.
Please let us know. Any further business at this point in time?
I would just like to wrap up the, our recommendation to the town board. Just because when things languish, you end up having to revisit them, and then it takes more time and energy than it would have if we had done it a little quicker.
Sure, I'm willing to listen.
Well, so, just to kind of go back to the beginning for a quick second. We had, our code has 4%, 5%, 6%, and 18% as the maximum percentage of lot to be occupied. R120, R80, R40, R10. And then it has the
Can you-
accessory buildings.
Can you give me those Rs again?
Yep.
The 4% is?
120.
Is 120?
Yep.
20? Yep.
5% R80, that's 2 acre, right?
All right.
6% R40, and 18% R10.
Okay, that's lot coverage as the code exists now.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but the chart says maximum percent of lot to be occupied,
Right.
and that's under principal building. We have an additional piece under accessory building,
Oh, thank you, Tom.
right? So we add a couple points under accessory building, but the gravamen of the issue is that how this is defined.
I'm good.
So
I'm good.
what we're currently doing is defining that as total site coverage. So that 4% has, or 5% has driveways and decks, and driveways even if they're just gravel in there. And so it makes it so most of the town is non-conforming, and I don't think that's the intent of the code, because there's not any code around here which has that intent.
Right. So
And
Tom-
it has to be congruent with, zoning has to be congruent with your comprehensive plan. There's no, I went through the comprehensive plan, there's no special carve-out saying that we're gonna do this and be super restrictive. So it would, in my mind, be easily challenged and easily defeated, and you would have a lot of issues because you would have applicants who would come before and would have lost rights. So I don't think it should continue. So that's why I'd like to kind of do something. So,
Let me just back up 1 minute. Tom, your interpretation is that when it says maximum percentage of lot to be occupied, principal building, that includes driveways, patios, decks, everything, not just the building itself. And then, of course, to that, we add accessory buildings and then these percentages that are dictated here.
And that's a crazy concept, that you have 40,000 square feet, which is your typical 1 acre lot.
Right.
Right, West Somers Park, that's your standard colonial there. And you got 2,400 square feet for your house and your driveway? And your
footprint.
deck?
That does seem to be restrictive.
That doesn't make any sense. So, and that's not, nowhere near, I went through the codes of every adjoining town. Nobody is in that neighborhood. So, what I recommended was keeping the building coverage numbers, and then instead of having a second column for accessory building, having a site coverage column, and getting those numbers, and being a little less than the neighboring towns, but giving people room for site coverage. So in our R40, you would now have 20% instead of 6%, and that's a big change, but it puts you normally just less than the rest of towns around us. So forget about how we got here, we need to do something. And then Tom and I, after this, we circulated this. There was a couple of definitions, proposed building coverage definition, proposed site coverage definition, and then we were talking about a structure definition. So we had 3 definitions that we kind of put back and around on the email. And we had a couple of questions of what those definitions, how they change things. Like, do we include driveways and decks? Is a deck a structure? And where do we get into pervious and impervious? And so we had a bit of a discussion online. Tom and I had a little bit more elaborate discussion. Nobody else kind of joined in. And then we sort of died where that was. So it would be great if we could circle back and try to find a way to wrap it up. I don't know about, I know open meetings is difficult and how we can figure that out, but I'm hoping we can get far enough along where we can send a letter, and I would assume that would come from you, Vic, out to the town board and say, this is the recommendation of the zoning board. You know, I can go back through this.
Can I just clarify something with you?
Yeah.
When you're saying 20% in an R40,
Yes.
is that 20% for complete lot coverage?
Yeah, that's
Building,
that's
building,
So with the site coverage definition, that percentage of the site area covered by the combined areas of all building structures and impervious surfaces, including impervious driveways, patios, and walkways.
so only impervious.
Yes. So
So if someone put a gravel driveway, it wouldn't be part of the
yeah,
equation.
because the idea is we want to recharge our aquifers, and so
Because-
you want people to have pervious surfaces wherever they can. So 20%, which is congruent or less than the adjoining towns for an R40, takes us from where we were 2,400. Now we're at 8,000 square feet, right? So that gives you enough for your house, your pool, your patio, and it's not obscene. You're not building, you know, you can have a garage which is separate, but you can't pave your whole lot.
And in some cases, you may have a lot that requires a long driveway, and that's where we see that people run into trouble with this coverage.
Because ideally, if the house is off the road, which might be nice, you have a long driveway, now you're going over the percentages.
It becomes an issue. The way it currently is, I don't think it should stand. But we could talk about what we want to include in the definitions, whether these numbers, if everyone's comfortable with those I got to, if you go back through the email chain, I compared us to the neighboring towns. And so if you pull up the neighboring towns, you'll see that this is a little bit stricter in general than the people around us.
And what do you propose, or what are you thinking about for R120, 80, and 10?
So that's 12, 15, 20, and 40 is what I'm proposing.
12,
which is,
15, 20, and 40. Yeah, we got to have a starting point here, what we're looking at.
yeah, so that, now, if you combine our two columns before, 4 and 2, we had 6, 7, 9, and 25. So there is a difference there, But I don't think this was ever intended to be site coverage. This was just intended to be building coverage in my mind, and it's become site coverage. So we have to do a site coverage number, which gives people room for their driveway and their life.
So you're basically about doubling what currently is there.
But what's currently there has not always been like that. It's not always been interpreted like that.
Right.
It's not actually there.
Now, I do have a question regarding decks, because
Yeah.
decks are a pervious surface underneath. So how can a deck be incorporated when you're dealing with a patio?
So a patio in general is impervious.
Correct, but a
And-
deck
and
isn't.
So that's some codes make the distinction between pervious and impervious, and this is a personal thing of mine, right? So I think you want people to do pervious surfaces. And I think you want to encourage that to the extent that you can. So if somebody's up against it and they do a deck rather than patio, I think that's beneficial for our good earth. And the water is going to run through, and that's what you want. Now, some codes have that distinction, some codes don't. That's comes from my personal predilection more than the rest of this, which is truly trying to normalize us among the adjoining towns.
Although, where we left off, a deck is considered a structure.
A deck is a structure.
So as it stands, decks are included in the structure,
Very good
regardless
point.
of whether they're pervious or impervious.
Right.
So those could be carved out.
No, but I frankly, it's a structure. I don't see you make a good one.
We moved the percentages up, so that's not gonna be an issue.
Now,
Yeah.
that part I understand, but if we don't do that, or the town doesn't accept that, then what are we gonna do for, i.e. a deck, when it's a impervious,
Well, it's
pervious surface?
because Tom's point is because we include it in the definition of structure, it's going to be under site coverage no matter what.
Okay.
So,
Right, it won't be considered.
yeah.
We won't have to
Pervious.
worry about talking about whether
And-
decks
and
are
that's-
pervious or not.
And that's one thing that somebody could say, hey, they have a strong opinion about, and we could modify our definition of structure. We put together, we looked at, Tom pulled up the definitions of structure in Yorktown, Bedford, North Salem, Cortland, and Lewisboro. And I came back with one definition. Anything which is constructed or erected which requires a location on or under the ground or attachment to something having such location, including but not limited to the following: any building, elevated deck, communication tower, tennis court or pool, but not anything which is less than 64 square feet in area and 8 feet in height. And this, obviously, I pulled from an amalgam of two local codes. That carve-out is if somebody has a doghouse or something like that, you don't want it to be called a structure. I think it's too pedantic, and I hate to get into that. And so that's my proposed definition of structure to add, in addition to these two definitions here, in addition to these percentage coverage.
Bart, could you give me some examples of other towns in an R40 district, what their lot coverage is?
Sure, I did a whole
You had a chart, I don't have it in front of
on
me,
one
but
of the
yeah.
emails. Let me see if I can pull that
I
up.
know you have done that, I just don't have it here.
Yeah, of course. How far did we go back?
And while he's looking for that, so what I did in the course of, as these emails were going around, is I just started to run actual scenarios. I ran scenarios on my house. I ran scenarios on my last house. Just ran scenarios on my father's old house, just to kind of
A reference.
to kind of get a sense to see what made sense. And I did suggest at one point pulling back a little bit, so we those numbers are not, again, as generous as some of the other towns that pulled back a little bit, just so as not to push this too far.
Right.
We pulled it in a little bit to arrive at the numbers that Bart's just given you there. But that's a really useful way to do it. Using these definitions, run your own house, see where you fall, and
Right.
see, and then you can kind of start to see if it makes sense. And in some cases, you know that the house that I used to live in was a 3-acre property. Therefore, I'd be given a lot more space. So I could have a bigger driveway area.
I can tell you, Vic, your house doesn't comply because your house came in front of me at the Board of Assessment review, And
Me, Tom, or me? Me?
and so I
Oh,
saw,
that's my mom's house.
so I saw your name and I saw our house, and this was in my mind because it was around this period of time. And I'm telling you, it doesn't comply. So you're out of conformance. It will comply if we do this. But otherwise, you got a problem. No, I was looking for. I did an earlier email which showed all the numbers from the various things.
Someone's in the hot seat.
That's actually my mom's house, to be official. Mine's across the street.
So,
Well, the house, although we just moved, my house prior to 2 months
Well, we
ago
just
would
pulled
not
it.
have complied either.
Really? Because it seems like these percentages are so small that most of the houses in town would seem not to comply.
Right.
so choose a town: North Salem, Lewisboro, Yorktown.
What does North Salem say?
Okay, let's pull that up.
I know you had a chart there.
Yeah, I did, but I'll pull up the E codes. We'll have it fresh from there. I find in my practice, when I have open matters, it's just it's a time vortex. You gotta close things out. I'm sure you experienced the same thing.
Absolutely.
So here are the districts, attachments. So R4.
And certainly I want to, solicit opinion of the three members who are not here this evening too, to
Yeah.
get their opinion on it. And then Tom, your input on this also. I like your perspective.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
A couple questions already. Maybe Dave Smith?
Yeah, we circulated to Dave and Tom and the other boards, and we can certainly do it again.
Because I think certainly with any correspondence we have with the town board, if we can say that, we've discussed this with the building inspector and
Well, once we have
planning and things like that.
a final letter, let's send it out to everybody and get any additional comments. I mean,
Right.
that essentially, if we have a closer agreement on where we are, I can do another draft and then send it to you. You can make any comments and circulate it. That's your chair.
Right.
That's your purview. I think you're gonna find that it takes me less time to draft these things because I do it as part of my living. All right, so I couldn't find North Salem that quickly. I pulled up Yorktown.
Okay.
And R40, maximum building coverage of lot is 15%. In Yorktown, R140.
That's an R40?
It's R140. I'm assuming that's 40. Yeah, that's R40. And then they have 20% and 25%. Maximum building coverage of actual. That's building coverage. That's not site coverage.
Okay, so
So that's the first number. So R1, they have 15% in this first column,
right?
Where we have 6.
where we have 6.
Okay. And we're proposing 20 combined. But
We're proposing 20 combined. So that gives you an idea.
So Yorktown is 15 plus.
15% of building coverage, and then they have additional for site coverage.
And what's that?
Well, it's not on this chart,
Okay.
so they do that separately. Unfortunately, most of these things were done in the 70s and 80s, and they're done differently in every town.
Yeah.
So I gotta pull up different charts, but that gives you an idea. Their first column is essentially R120. They're at 10% for building coverage. They go 10%, 10%, 15, 20, 25%. Coming down the way.
Here's the original.
Okay.
Okay. So 1 acre comparison. So you're saying here, town of Bedford for building 10%, impervious 20%.
Right.
Okay. Town of North Salem, you have building 20%, impervious 40%.
Wow.
Town of Lewisboro, they just have building 12%, Town of Carmel 15%, Town of Yorktown 15%, Town of Southeast 20%, then they have 40% for impervious. So it seems like some of the towns don't address the impervious.
They don't address site coverage in total, they just address building coverage. But if you look at the building coverage numbers, we're way low. But I'm giving some people room in site coverage, and this site coverage number is, in some parts, closer to building coverage in some of our adjoining towns.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to upset the apple cart, you know, and spur a lot of development.
That was it, correct?
Yeah, that's 100% what I was looking for. But that's what our neighbors are. And my point is, if you're a homeowner and you're coming from Yonkers or Manhattan, and you're choosing where to live, Yorktown, Somers, or Lewisboro, you're not reading the code. You're buying a colonial in one of the towns, and you don't expect you can't build a pool or you can't have a driveway if you come to Somers.
Yeah, it just seems that this is so restrictive, it would prevent any reasonable person from doing anything on their property.
And so what
Yeah.
happens is people don't read the code, they don't know, they come here, and right now, they're being discouraged from, you know, modernizing their properties.
Yeah. Or we're gonna have 100 applications a year for the zoning board for variances.
Well, or, you know, some people just, they start down the road and they stop.
Yeah.
You know, you don't always get that many applications, but, and some people just put driveways in. I mean,
Not thinking they have to get any approvals or
right,
anything else.
I mean, it's,
Right.
Tom, do you see this as an issue going forward, that you're going to not be able to issue a lot of permits that you otherwise would because of this?
I think this is a positive to our
Right.
going,
This increase in the percentages.
yeah.
And Tom, I'd like your recommendation too on what, you know, what your opinion is. You wanna give us a range? And you know,
Yeah, I just want to see what your definition changes are, basically.
I'll forward.
The percentages,
Yeah.
you know, seem to be pretty good with that right now.
take a look at these definitions. There's the existing and the proposed. For those two, and then we have a structure one, so I can forward.
Was anything going to be done with drives, whether they're paved or not, unpaved?
Well, that goes, so if you look at those definitions there, that's as close as you're gonna get to your answer.
I'll forward Tom the emails as well.
Okay, good. It just seems to make sense to give us a little bit more clarity than what we
Right.
have.
right.
And it would be municipal boards, town boards seldom have the time to go through, or the background to really go through zoning codes, and they're often antiquated in part. You know, they get updated on an ad hoc basis because somebody brings something up and something's a problem for somebody who has, for some special interest. But, you know, something like this we can do without waiting for anybody. I don't wanna redesign the whole thing.
Yeah, so I'd suggest we circulate a clean copy
Okay,
of the most recent proposal,
okay,
which would be the old chart versus the new chart,
yep,
would be the
Three
old
definitions.
definition, the three old definitions versus the three new,
Two
two old
and
versus
three
three
new.
new, because we've added the structure definition, which
Okay.
currently doesn't exist. We circulate that to the board and Tom, and we can even put the planner on it if necessary.
Did you have any thoughts on the definition change?
No, were you going to define structure?
Yes.
We have one for that as well.
Yeah, we have one for that, that came after that was just in an email between Tom and I. So we have that one for structure that I read earlier that I'll forward to you right now, and Denise, and make sure it's out there.
I can, yeah, if you include me, I can forward whatever you need to Dave Smith,
Okay,
the town planner.
yeah, and we.
One questionable thing was the area of an in-ground swimming pool, the patio around the pool usually is calculated as impervious.
Yeah.
The water itself, I mean,
It's impervious.
it's kind of, it's.
I think it's impervious. I mean, I think
Okay.
that's the logical definition. If it's pervious, you got a bad pool to build it. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's collecting water, it doesn't go out, there's no runoff unless the pool
It's not
overflows.
that- That's the thing.
That's
So
the
I would
point.
like to clarify that and include it if.
yeah,
you
sure,
know,
we can
so-
do that.
So it can't be questioned.
But again,
I have a
so,
lot of argument with that.
that would
But
add.
you're getting argument with that because you,
This low, and we get this much water, it's still gonna overflow.
Right, it won't be an issue anymore because the
You have room.
percentages have been increased, so yes, it's impervious, but nobody's gonna mind that because it's not affecting their percentage because they've got more to work with
I think
now.
we should specifically say the principal structure includes boom, 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 pools, and, you know.
yeah, we have building coverage and site coverage, and what a structure is. That's a question you're gonna run into all the time when you have these kind of restrictive numbers, but if you got 20%, I don't think you're gonna see it, but we can also address it. I mean,
A lot of designers ask that.
So-
That may vary from town to
yeah.
town.
So I don't know, does anyone, for me, the pool is impervious, because, it's not supposed to leak. You do have evaporation, it can collect rain when it's low, but the structure, it's a structure and it's impervious. I would
Yeah.
never call it pervious.
Plus, I don't think we want somebody putting an Olympic-sized
And-
swimming
and then-
pool on their
And
property.
then somebody,
I
then you
would
put a
agree.
cover on it and
Yeah.
change it, it doesn't evaporate
I
the
agree
same.
with that, I would like to put that in the
Yeah.
definition.
Did
Yeah,
anyone else think it's pervious?
No, I could,
I'm staying out of that one.
Well, I mean, you put a cover on a pool, doesn't it change everything? Isn't it completely impervious?
No, because you have Mako covers that are porous.
yeah, usually the covers, water goes through the cover.
Right.
Yeah,
So
some
like
of
a
them.
mesh almost.
Right.
Yeah, well, some of them not. I mean,
Right,
Some are
put
just
tarp
plastic
spread
covers.
over.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got to make a determination, one determination is probably impervious is probably a more conservative approach to take.
Yeah, and if somebody has 20% and they got 8,000 square feet, I think they should be able to fit the pool. I don't think that's
Right.
an unreasonable number. I mean, there are plenty of places with bigger numbers, but, you know, once again, do we want to be stuccoed and bricked all the way through? I just want to be reasonable.
Now, I do have a question regarding moving forward here, in the sense of, and if anything got approved, and if it comes down to this, the town board denies the application, anything's gonna be grandfathered in from previous
Well-
permits and stuff?
Well, it's no longer gonna, if you have an existing CO, if you have an existing site plan, those are valid. And when somebody comes in to make modifications, they're subject to the code, and the code is now gonna say 20%. They're gonna have more room than they did the year before.
Right.
So, that's good. They may come in and build a pool or a deck now.
Well, you're saying if this were to not be granted,
Correct.
then everything would remain as is until someone comes for a building permit.
Right.
In which case, if the old interpretation, the old numbers stand, then they would likely not be allowed to expand, and may find themselves in need of a variance as a result of requesting a permit, correct?
Right?
So every time now somebody comes in for a permit, we've now defined what these old numbers are. They may, so in other words, if I were still in my old house, which exceeds the limit, and I wanted to put in a pool, and I came to get a permit for that, not only would I not get a permit for a pool, because I was in excess of those numbers, but I would also now need a variance for the existing things, correct?
You're covered under your CO for your
Okay.
existing things. We'll start new, give me a zoning.
Provided
special,
that they all had a
what
CO.
you're proposing, in addition to what exists.
Provided that I hadn't put in a driveway without a
Correct.
permit.
Yeah, or an accessory structure
Right.
or something to that effect without a permit.
And keep in mind, our recommendation to the town board, they can modify it. They could do more or less, you know, it's not kind of an all or nothing. It's up to the town board to decide what
But
percentage.
the point is that there's something here, and we're getting it in front of them, and they'll either defer or modify or accept. And
Right.
at least we've done our job, because that's the extent of our job.
Right.
And then can I just, we talked a little bit about this, but it's also true that the planning board can approve a site plan that does not meet the current criteria.
And that's
We got
kind,
cluster house, zoning that's not even on.
it's a
the
little
chart
unique
there.
to Somers. I mean, that's a workaround the code, which is kind of weird.
When they create a subdivision, that's generally when that happens, when the plan, obviously.
Normally, that would come to zoning.
Specify the square footage of the dwellings that could be built on the lot.
Or somewhere along the way, they added something into the code which says that the planning board can make these modifications. But in a normal town, you need a zoning variance to make those modifications, most of them. And then it comes here, and then you say, okay, it's a minor one, it's excessive one, but that's how they're getting around this interpretation. But then all these people, these innocent caveat emptor buyers come, and then they can't do anything because they're past
Yeah.
these numbers, and that's
There was a recent matter before the planning board. I happened to be watching a planning board meeting where there was a swimming pool that was so massive and it's surrounding patios and structures and pool house that it alone probably wouldn't have met the current criteria, but it was sailing through the planning board without issue. So we should probably circulate a copy of this to the planning board as well.
well,
or
no, because essentially, well, yes, we're welcome to, but the idea is to not undermine, to have standards, and then not have the planning board undermine the standards.
Right.
To have standards and have those be the standards, because otherwise, what's the point? I mean, you're supposed to be treating people fairly and equally, and everyone should feel like if they don't have a special name, they're not going to make it through. So,
should they not want to follow?
well, so they've needed a workaround because of this, and so they have that workaround in the code. But maybe when this happens, maybe there'll be less of that.
Well, right, and I would hope that we could all get consistent. So that's why I should someone be pulled in? That's my question.
No, we can. I don't know anyone on the board, but we can circulate to the planning board. But frankly,
Why would my question will be why would you do that? I'd like an answer
because
from the planning board.
well, I'll refrain. Yeah.
I mean, like the development that's next to Somerstown, that housing development there, that's like 60-some units that are very close together. That had to be a planning board approval. I'm not sure that met the zoning on that property before it was built. Now, I don't know if town board changed the zoning on that property, but certainly it didn't come before zoning. The only thing I know we did with the zoning was the underground
That went
tanks.
to town and planning board, and there's a bunch of quirky things about that one.
Now, the town board, of course, can decide and approve something like that, but I think the planning board operating on their own to decide that, I think, would be more of an issue.
So
Because the town board is charged with, setting the law, the zoning law, and
why that was built as condos and taxed as condos versus taxed as single family is an interesting question. But there's several kind of interesting questions, right? A lot of other towns wouldn't have brought new ratables on at a condo rate, but that is more curious to me than the fact that they're well exceeding this. But what we can do is make a recommendation on a code issue, try to coordinate with the boards, and see where it goes. But there's certainly been an end run around the code, and it's going through planning
For new construction.
for new construction. Yeah, that's where the money is, new construction.
okay.
Is the video go to planning?
All right, so we'll circulate the most recent version of this, and
We're offline, right?
no.
No,
No? Okay.
no, this is part of the
Town
meeting.
board may even do that, they may certain, refer it out. So
Right.
You might want to planning and whomever else. But it would be good, it's probably a good idea to consult them and get the modification, do it once, rather than have to go back to the drawing board and get everybody on board with.
All right, well, we'll circulate it amongst ourselves and Tommy, and,
Yeah,
And planning department give us input.
well, I think amongst ourselves, make sure there are no objections. Then we've now finalized our recommendation, and then it can be circulated to town board, planning board, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody should give their input, so we hopefully come up with, the best solution to this.
Right.
But clearly what we have now seems to be very restrictive. That's far below anything else in any adjacent town, and seems to be unworkable. So, okay.
Fair enough.
All right, so that's how we're going to proceed. Any other matters we want to discuss before we wrap up the meeting?
That's it.
Nope.
Nope. No further matters?
No, good.
Okay, good night, everyone. This ends the zoning board meeting for this evening. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe. Bye-bye.